Every year leading up to the NBA season, you have all of these major media outlets, analysts, as well as fans give their preseason prediction, rankings, projected standings, who is going to win the title, even individual awards like MVP, Rookie of the Year, all the way down to Sixth Man of the Year. And we all eat it up, right? We want to see what people are predicting for this upcoming season. We want to see where our team is being ranked among the league and what they think of the players on our roster. And even I myself, I do this as well. You guys know after the preseason, before the regular season begins, I give my Eastern Conference predictions as far as seedings. I even do a whole video on who are going to be the winning individual awards specifically for the Bulls roster, like who is going to be the Bulls MVP, who is going to be the Bulls most improved player of the year, etc. And it's funny because even though we do this and we all love the content, it's why media outlets come out with these rankings, because they know people will click on it. At the end of the day though, it's kind of pointless. Like really, so many things can happen to any player or team in a given NBA season, and it makes predicting what's going to happen pretty dumb. And maybe I'm just a bitter Bulls fan because yet again, we have most people counting the Bulls out when putting together their predictions. And this is just me saying all of these takes are bad because we really don't know what's going to happen. But because I've had a lot of people ask me, what do you think about the power rankings coming out from sites like NBA.com and ESPN and where they have the Bulls, I figured I would share my opinion on these awful predictions and shed some light on why some of these are wildly inaccurate. And that's what we'll be discussing in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You were listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, first and foremost, I want to start by saying part of the reason I think some of these predictions are stupid is because it's way too early to be putting out preseason projected standings when we're still about 5 to 6 weeks away from training camp. So much can happen between now and then, and even more can happen from training camp all the way up until the regular season starts. Like for all we know, Kevin Durant could be going to the Miami Heat, and that would instantly make them favorites out of the East instead of, say, Boston. Or hell, if he got traded to the Bulls, it's not going to happen. Don't go off on me in the comments. But that would make the Bulls title contenders. Again, not going to happen, just emphasizing why it's way too early to be making these claims for where teams are going to fall. Or what about Kyrie Irving? Is he going to stay with the Nets? Or is he going to go to the Lakers, which represent a bit of a power shift between conferences? What would that mean for Ben Simmons? Like, would the Nets just blow everything up and rebuild? So that's the first thing about this that bothers me, is that it's just way too early to be putting this out. It's different if we're having the discussion a couple nights before the start of the regular season. Now, for those that weren't aware, the Bulls were not favored so well by two of the biggest outlets in the industry, in NBA.com and ESPN. NBA.com has the Bulls finishing 6th in the East, while ESPN has the Bulls as a play-in team finishing 8th. So let's break down some of this so you can see where each stacked up in the Eastern Conference. For NBA.com, they had the Celtics finishing with the #1 seed, followed by the Bucks, the Sixers, the Heat, the Raptors, and then the Bulls at 6, followed by the Nets, Hawks, the Cavs, and the Knicks, rounding out the top 10. For ESPN, they've got Boston and Milwaukee as well for #1 and 2. They have the Heat #3, followed by the Sixers, the Raptors, and the Hawks for the top 6. They have the Cavs, yes, the Cavs at 7, the Bulls at 8, the Nets at 9, and the Knicks at 10. Now, here is what I'll say about media counting the Bulls out. I'm actually all for this. I feel like the Bulls feed off of these doubts. They actually like being the underdog, and at the start of last season, when everyone was saying that DeMar was the worst offseason signing, how they overpaid for Caruso, giving him a 4-year deal, how Lavine was just an empty stats type player who couldn't actually take his game and translate it to winning, how the Bulls were going to have a terrible defense and maybe even miss the playoffs as a result. Like, the guys took that to heart, played with massive chips on their shoulders with so much to prove, and they came out and turned heads, surprising everyone in the league, including Bulls fans, when they were one of the top teams in the East all the way through February, before the season got derailed by injuries, of course. And then, obviously, once the narrative shifted a bit, when you started to have higher expectations of the Bulls because they were playing so well, and you all of a sudden thought, hey, do they actually maybe have a chance at making a deep playoff run? The pressure to an extent started to mount, and of course we saw the Bulls falter and drop in the standings as a result, which again was compounded by the roster not being able to stay healthy. So hey, if the media is going to do the same thing, where it lights a fire under these guys to go out and prove all the haters wrong, I'm all for it. Let's just hope that they maintain that energy and fire throughout the whole season, including the playoffs. So there's that, but come on now. These rankings are pretty bad. I'll start with ESPN since they have the Bulls lower. I don't have too many issues with the Bulls being 6th like NBA.com suggests per se, because yes, there is uncertainty surrounding Lonzo's health. Let's face it, the East did get considerably better at the top while the Bulls improved marginally. But first and foremost for ESPN, having the Bulls finish with 44 wins, with the 8th seed, a play-in team. They have the Cavs, Hawks, and Raptors all ahead of the Bulls. I don't see how in your right mind you can put the Cavs ahead of the Bulls. Yes, they had their own issues with injuries as well, which is why they also fell in the standings and ultimately even fell out of the play-in despite finishing 8th last season. But it's not like they had any major additions to their team. I believe they signed Ricky Rubio and Robin Lopez, 2 vets past their primes. Don't get me wrong, they have a lot of young talent. I actually think they'll be a fun team to watch, especially if Jarrett Allen is fully healthy. Colin Sexton will be coming back, although I'm not sure how he'll fit with Darius Garland after his rise with Sexton being out most of last season. But Garland, Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley, who in my opinion should have won the Rookie of the Year award last year, him coming into his sophomore season, of course, former Bull Lowry Markkanen. Oh, and I almost forgot Karis LeVert. I actually forgot they traded for him at the deadline. So yes, this team will be fun to watch, but they're not going to finish ahead of the Bulls. They're too young and don't have the requisite experience that the Bulls do, nor do they have the star power that the Bulls have. The other one I struggle with because both of the outlets actually put them ahead of the Bulls, and that was the Raptors. Like, yes, the Raptors finished ahead of the Bulls last season with the 5th seed, but that was also because the Bulls fell off a cliff at the end of the year and the Raptors were on the rise in the season. The Bulls actually played really well against Toronto during the regular season, and it was clear the Bulls were the better team when they matched up side by side. For the Raptors, again, it's not like this is a team that added a ton of talent. They added Otto Porter, and that's about it. Then again, of course, Otto Porter has now turned into a serviceable player after leaving the Bulls. They have a great core with Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam. They re-signed Chris Boucher, Scotty Barnes, the Rookie of the Year, but their roster really hasn't changed that much, and they kind of overachieved last year. This is a team that most thought would actually miss the playoffs last season, and they did well for themselves. But for a team that is pretty much staying the same and finished with 48 wins last year, ahead of a team like the Bulls, who win healthy, I don't see how you can't count them out as a 50-plus win team, by the way. They were well on target to achieve that last season before losing Lonzo Ball for most of the year, Caruso missing a lot of time, Patrick Williams obviously missing most of the season, and Zach Lavine playing through an injury post the All-Star break. And look, I know some will say, well, can you really assume the Bulls are going to be healthy? Outside Lonzo Ball, which the hope is he'll be ready to start the season, Patrick Williams is looking great from what we've seen so far this offseason. Caruso is looking healthy, and Zach is looking like his usual self in some of the highlight footage that we've seen from him thus far. So yes, we should assume the Bulls are going to be healthy. And that's why I think some of these rankings are so ridiculous, because we saw what this Bulls team can be when they are healthy, and it's certainly better than 44 wins and finishing 8th in the East, especially against teams who really didn't improve their roster all that much. Now for the Hawks, I mean, this one is tough because they added one of the better two-way guards in the league, who was an all-star last year in DeJounte Murray. The pairing of him and Trae Young is bound to be must-watch basketball, with both of their playmaking abilities as well as scoring prowess. And of course, Murray actually makes up for some of Trae's lack of defense. And yes, they still have John Collins, they still have Clint Capella, they still have Bogdanovich. Like, they were able to maintain their core outside of losing Kevin Huerter and still bringing in another all-star. That is a very solid offseason, but the jury is still out on whether the duo of Trae Young and Murray will actually make each other better, because the offseason moves aside, the Hawks had a very disappointing season last year, finishing 9th in the East and needing the play-in to squeak into the playoffs before getting embarrassed by the Miami Heat in the first round. This is after they went to the conference finals the year prior. So can you really put the Hawks ahead of the Bulls? I would still say no. Now, the top 4, yes, I totally get it. Celtics, Bucks, Heat, Sixers, yes. Like, despite the Bulls, my biases, I know the Bulls aren't better than those 4 teams, at least as they stand right now anyway. Doesn't mean that crazier things have happened and the Bulls could finish ahead of a couple of them. Like, if we're really just talking about the regular season, some of these guys could run into injury issues. The Bucks could take the regular season slow as they did last offseason. The Celtics could do the same thing, knowing they went all the way to the finals last year. The Miami Heat, still going to be a great team, but Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler are a year older now. Lowry is going to be turning 37 this season. Jimmy will be turning 33 next month. Duncan Robinson has kind of fallen off as their sharpshooter. Still a better team than the Bulls on paper anyway. Just saying, I would be surprised if they maybe took a step back. And then of course with the Sixers, you never know what's going to happen with James Harden. How is he going to show up? Is he going to be fully healthy? You can even say that about Joel Embiid, who obviously has had his history of injuries. Now, the other reason I bring all this up and the media counting out the Bulls is because it doesn't just relate to the Bulls as a team. You likely also saw hoopshypes.com, which, to be honest, who cares about that outlet, especially with how they ranked their top 10 small forwards and top 10 shooting guards. They had Zach Lavine ranked 4th among shooting guards in the league behind Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, and Jaylen Brown, which I just don't see how you could put Mitchell ahead of Lavine at this point. Brown and Booker, I mean, there's a case for that, but Zach is pretty on par even with both of those guys when you look at their numbers and their level of impact on the court. But what really was egregious was that DeMar DeRozan, after the insane season he just had, in which for a good portion of the year he was a top 5 MVP candidate, they had him 8th among all small forwards in the league behind Tatum, Durant, Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, Jimmy Butler, Paul George, and Brandon Ingram. Yes, they have Ingram ahead of DeMar DeRozan. Just straight up disrespectful for a guy who was selected All-NBA second team and was the only constant on this Bulls team that kept them winning when guys were out of the lineup. Yes, the main guys, Tatum, KD, Kawhi, LeBron, fine. Although, can you really rank Kawhi ahead of DeMar when we haven't seen him play for over a year now? Paul George also injured most of the last season. That's still a stretch, even putting him ahead of DeMar. Anyway, the point in all of this is we're seeing the same thing we saw last season. People writing off the Bulls, not giving them much of a chance. Their star players, meh, they're being viewed as being overrated. The Bulls use that as fuel for the fire, and my hope is that they'll take that and respond accordingly. And the other point is it's just way too early to be making all these types of predictions, and if you're going to do so, put some analysis behind it to legitimize these claims. So no, I'm not going to give my preseason rankings and where I think the Bulls will fall in this video. I will do that as we get closer to the start of the season. But let me know in the comments how you guys felt about these rankings from ESPN and NBA.com. And guys, until then, as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.